Hello everyone, my name is Ernesto, and today I just wanted to go over my comic book collection as it stands about a year into actively collecting and reading comics. So it's only one shelf so far, but I've been trying to really intentionally just obtain what I want to read, what I think I might like, and trying my best not to get something new when I haven't read what I already have. So I've been collecting and reading pretty much just DC Comics for the past year, and there are several things that I wanted to start off with. I really wanted to start off with characters that I didn't know that well. So I started obtaining a few of these with that in mind. I'm going to go left to right on this shelf. It's kind of organized in format. So DC Finest, some trade paperbacks, and then one absolute edition that I have right now. Before that though, I have one that's sort of like hidden back here. This is the Marvel Premiere Edition of Daredevil Born Again, the comic story. I really enjoy this one. I picked this up on a whim at Target, I believe, because it was on sale. The one thing that was kind of like something I realized I didn't like as much is the size of the format. So I know that, like, say the DC Compact comics have been selling really well, but I kind of came to the conclusion that that isn't for me because they're even smaller than this, and this I kind of found, oh, I miss the size of the trade paperback. So I'm considering picking this up, but in trade paperback form. I didn't finish the story, even though I was really enjoying it, and I really like Daredevil a lot. But this is my one and only foray into Marvel Comics so far. The rest, though, is DC. So here to the left is all of the DC Finest editions that I have currently. I'm going to take these out one at a time. Hopefully these don't collapse on me, just to show you what I've got. So I started off with this Batman Year 1 and 2. This was, I believe, the very first DC Finest that came out. If you're unaware, the DC Finest line is basically DC presenting each character or team or event and stuff like that chronologically from their first appearance up to, it seems, the year 2011, which is when the universe reset with the New 52. And this collects the first Batman stories after Crisis on Infinite Earths, which happened in the mid-'80s. So this collects every Batman story, Detective Comics and the Batman main line and such, between 1986 and 1987. And then that's followed up immediately with the next one, Batman the Killing Joke and Other Stories. This one I'm in the middle of right now, and I'm really, really enjoying. I really like the Detective Comics line in it so far. The main Batman adventures as well are really intriguing. They're a lot more mature than the early stories from this volume. And this collects the next years after, which is 1987 to 1988. And I am planning on picking up the next one that's been solicited for 1988 to 1989, which I think is A Death in the Family. I know that's an iconic storyline, so I am actually really looking forward to like being able to read and see Batman's stories as they continue chronologically through time, rather than just picking up the like main stories that everyone knows and recommends, because there's a lot of stuff in here that I wouldn't have picked up on its own because I just wouldn't have known that I was into this kind of stuff. So I've been really enjoying this so far. Haven't gotten to the Killing Joke yet. I'm in the middle of the Son of the Demon storyline right now in there. Now this next one is actually my newest pickup. This is The Flash, the Human Thunderbolt, which collects the original issues of this Barry Allen version of The Flash. I read the first few pages so far, and I was really enjoying it. This is from the beginning of the Silver Age of comics. This collects The Flash from 1956 to 1961, so it's really cool. This one, the Green Arrow. I'll fix this right here so it doesn't all collapse. Green Arrow. Collects Green Arrow from 1987 to 1988. This is, again, after Crisis on Infinite Earths. This, I wasn't really I wasn't sure what to expect going into reading this book, but it is very dark, very mature, very not for children, but it is very compelling and very, just really cool stories that I never knew Green Arrow had like a part in. And the follow-up to this is being solicited to come out in a couple of months. Definitely going to pick that up when it comes out because I finished this one and really enjoyed it. And I want to know where the story continues from here. Next is Superman, the first superhero. So this collects the beginning of Superman's journey, starting with the Action Comics issue that he appears in and goes into the first several issues of the Superman series proper. I haven't gotten too deep into this book. This collects Superman from 1938 to 1940. And it's really amusing and really fascinating to read what Superman was like in these early iterations of him and how much actually I found that has stuck with the character. There's just like so much already there from the very first page of the very first appearance of Superman. It's actually wild, and I really love the way that these look on the page. The colors I think are so vibrant. I think the paper quality is really nice, and yeah, that's one of the reasons I really love DC Finest format. All the restoration, all the coloring that's gone into it, and that it chronologically collects a character. I'm not sure that I'm going to go for the follow-up with this. I really like having this for the like sort of historical, contextual purposes, but I think there are other stories in the Superman timeline that I'd rather get first. So that's what I got. And then I've got Wonder Woman, The Legend of Wonder Woman. This collects Wonder Woman from 1983 to 1986. These are all of the issues leading up to her reintroduction after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths, which is an iconic run by George Pettis after that. But this is everything before that point. And I had no interest in this book at all until I saw some folks on some of the Facebook groups start sharing some of the artwork in this. And I found, wow, that's really cool and compelling art, which I wasn't expecting based on the cover of this. So I was really enjoying these stories. The artwork I think is really awesome. For the majority of the book, the art doesn't look like what it does on the cover. It looks really cool. So as another piece of historical reference, it's cool having this volume. And then the final DC Finest in here is Wonder Woman Origins and Omens. This is the beginning of Gail Simone's run on Wonder Woman, which collects Wonder Woman from 2007 up to 2009. The follow-up to this has been solicited for, I believe, May of next year. Definitely want to check that out. I think that covers the rest of this run, if not most of the next bit of the run. So I remember reading this through. I was traveling with this book, so it's slightly beat up on the cover, but it's held up pretty well. Really enjoyed so many of these stories on here. Wonder Woman has grown to be like one of my top 5 favorite DC heroes. Her character is just really cool, and I admire a lot of qualities about her and the way that Gail Simone writes for her as this like super cool warrior who just does not back down and will always keep trying no matter what. So those are all of the DC Finest books that I've got. I love the way they look together on a shelf, and there are a bunch that are out that I want to get next, and several more that are being solicited, like the follow-ups to some of these books and some other things that I want to dip my toe into. This is just such a really cool format. These started coming out about a year ago when I started collecting comics, and I feel sort of lucky in that regard, where I'm starting on the ground floor with this line specifically, which seems to be doing really well. But there are some stories that I know are like important for certain characters that I'm kind of holding out for a DC Finest version of before I make a purchase for a trade paperback, because I'd rather collect a character chronologically if a run is really important or I'm really interested in that character. I'm not trying to pick up DC Finest books if I don't have any interest in reading them. For pretty much all of these, I've read at least a little bit of it. I've completed reading several of these. And I'm really trying to reserve trade paperbacks for like one-off stories or just like short self-contained stories that aren't in a larger run that would suit the DC Finest format. So with that, let's get into the trade paperbacks. So first one I want to point out is this one, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. I made a video on this channel about this because this was my first comic book. This was the one I picked up first because after James Gunn made his announcement to about his upcoming DC Universe 2 years ago now, he named this comic specifically as the one that they're adapting for the upcoming Supergirl movie, which they've already finished filming. They're going to release in just a few months now, so it's crazy that all of this has been like coming to fruition. But I've never been in the position where I knew the source material of a comic property before having watched the film. I've read like books before I've seen the movie, but not for comic material specifically. So I wanted to know what all the fuss was about, so I picked it up. Really, really loved it. The art in here is just awesome. I really look forward to seeing how they adapt aspects of this story into live action. How they're going to integrate Lobo, who is not in this book at all, but supposedly was meant to be a part of the story, and how they're going to integrate all of that together. So I really look forward to that. Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, really cool pickup. Now this is Batman Ego and Other Tales. This is by Darwin Cook. I really admire Darwin Cook's artistic sensibilities. His art, the way he draws, and the way he writes as well, I've become a really, really big fan of. I've read through most of this, not all of it, but I really admire his sensibilities when it comes to this, and this is an example of one of those trade paperback pickups, which is sort of like one and done, its own sort of thing that doesn't like continue, or you need issues before this in order to make sense of it. You kind of can just dive into this, read it for what it is, and enjoy it. So that's the one Batman trade paperback I have. Now next are the two Superman trade paperbacks that I've got. Actually, I started with For All Seasons, which I picked up because I had seen on many lists that this is one of the essential Superman comics to start off with. So I picked it up at my local comic shop, and I really, really fell in love with the art and the story of this book. This is one of my favorite books I've read so far. This is by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, and it just has lovely art, and I'm considering picking up the Absolute edition of this story because I think it's just very, very beautiful, and I love the character of Superman. He's my favorite DC hero. And so, yeah, I just really admire this story. Now, the other one I had picked up was this one, All-Star Superman, which, again, was, on many lists for, like, what to read if you want to read Superman. And for many people was the thing that they recommended you start off with. I would disagree, because when I first started reading this, I was really confused on not Superman himself. I knew enough about the character to understand what was going on with him specifically, but with things around him in the DC universe, I just was unfamiliar with when I started reading this. I've seen differing opinions from different people. Some people read this as their first Superman comic and they absolutely adored it and didn't feel like they were missing anything. However, I did find myself confused with some of the characters that were popping up, or the antics with Jimmy Olsen. After having read this book and then looking into more media after the fact, it feels like it fleshes this out more. So I would say to read this after you've been reading Superman for a while. At least that's what I would do if I were to do it again. So I definitely suggest starting off with For All Seasons as your intro to Superman. I wouldn't go for All-Star Superman as your first Superman thing. It just really confused me as someone new to DC Comics. And then under this Funko of Superman here, I have the Wonder Woman trade paperbacks from Tom King's run, which is currently going on. I haven't been picking up the issues as they've been coming out. I've started with this trade paperback because I wanted to get into characters that I didn't really know much about, even though I knew who they were. Wonder Woman being the main one of those, because I knew Batman well enough, I knew Superman well enough, even though I hadn't read anything. But Wonder Woman, you hear a lot about, but I just didn't know much about her. So I wanted to start off reading her, did a little research, seemed like this would be a good introduction to her. And I thought it really was. I really enjoy the art in this book. I think it's really great. The storyline is really fascinating, interesting, an interesting place to put Diana in. And the whole thing I found really, really interesting. And then I picked up subsequent volumes. So this is volume 2 of the run. Starts off with a really nice issue between her and Superman. This one is really interesting. The downfall of this one is that the last couple of issues are a tie-in to like an event that's going on when this was happening. So I was really confused. I wasn't expecting that. And then this is the third and latest volume of the trade paperbacks of this run so far. A really good one. I enjoyed this one more. And then the fourth volume has already been solicited, and that's coming out next year. But I'll pick that up when that drops so I can get a continuation of the story. Back here are just some floppies that I got as a birthday gift a couple of years ago. I think they're really cool showcases of art, so that's why they live here on the shelf. I have a variety of them. These are just in the middle of runs, so nothing that can really stand on its own as they're individual issues, but they include some really cool characters that I like Daredevil and Batman and whatnot. Now finally is this hunker, which is Absolute DC, The New Frontier. This is my first Absolute edition, obviously, and I first started reading this story digitally on my iPad and was just absolutely falling in love with the art and the story of this. Again, this is Darwin Cook. Super great storytelling, and been really enjoying this and the way that all the characters are drawn and what's going on in the story. And so I knew that I wanted to reserve Absolute editions for things that I really admired the art of, and that also can stand on their own. And so this story completely stands on its own. It's really, really great so far. I haven't finished it yet, but I've been making my way through it. And there are a few more Absolute editions that are sort of calling my name. But like I mentioned, I want to be patient with what I pick up, and I don't want to be too hasty and start getting things that I'm not even going to read at all, or take a long time to get to reading. So I'm going to put some of these back as I continue speaking about what I've been collecting. So yeah, I want to keep collecting Wonder Woman stories. I really, really want to get into Green Lantern. I think I'm going to pick up the Jeff Johns Omnibus, the first volume of that, because that just seems so like cool and in my, wheelhouse. So I want to check out those stories for what they are, and I don't necessarily want to wait for the DC Finest of that. And yeah, so I mean, you might be thinking, why not get the omnibus editions of, say, Gail Simone's run instead of going for the DC Finest? Well, the DC Finest volumes are cheaper individually. This retails for about $40, but at most places you can find them on sale for $30, even down to like $25, $27. So they're much more economical in that sense. They look really cool on a shelf together, even though omnibuses do as well. And they're smaller, they're more portable and easy to read. And so I want to reserve omnibuses for other things after 2011 that I know for sure won't be collected in DC Finest, or at least anytime soon. And, some really like seminal runs and stories. So I think the Green Lantern run by Jeff Johns fits that description. I started reading that in a bookstore, the first volume of that, and I wanted to continue. I didn't pick it up, but I think that'll, if anything, will be my first omnibus pickup. It'll probably be that. In the meantime, I'm okay waiting for DC Finest editions of all of these stories. I look forward to filling out more of these characters chronologically over time. Batman is the one that DC seems to be prioritizing, which makes sense. Batman is their top seller for sure. The Superman ones that have been solicited, like the one that's supposed to come out in May, I believe, of next year, time and time again, that seems like a really cool, important run. So I'm going to pick that up and start reading those stories. And there, just seems to be good there. Okay, so that was a little tour of my comic book collection, about 1 year into collecting and reading them. So I'm really proud of this little shelf. I have really, really been enjoying like getting into comics and reading them, and I really like took the plunge into going for it after the whole thing with the DCU starting to come up. And watching the Superman movie, I was able to draw reference from both of these stories because I had read them prior to that. And I just, that's really cool to be able to have that further insight into a thing, or be really interested in how these storytellers shape or change the mythos of some of these characters to fit their own vision for what this new world should be. So I find that very exciting and very, really cool, a really cool journey to partake in. Okay, so that's it for this. Consider subscribing. Let me know what you started reading, how big is your collection now, and how long you've been reading as well. I'd really be interested to know. All right, thanks so much for watching. Take care.